Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. At least 3 people have died in an attack on the U.S. consulate in the Pakistani city of Peshawar. A witness said he saw attackers armed with rocket-propelled grenades approach the consulate. They first opened fire at security personnel at the post near the consulate, and then blasts went off. A Pakistani intelligence official said no one was wounded inside the U.S. complex, but 3 of its guards had been killed. Hours earlier, a suspected suicide bomber blew himself up at a political meeting in the Lower Deir district, about 50 miles northeast of Peshawar, killing 38 people. In Iraq Sunday, 3 suicide bombers detonated car bombs within moments of each other in a coordinated attack on foreign embassies in central Baghdad. As many as 41 people died and more than 200 were injured. It was the deadliest attack in Iraq since January. The blasts occurred near the Iranian, Egyptian, and German embassies. Meanwhile, Friday, gunmen killed 24 people in a Sunni village south of Baghdad. The attacks have occurred at a time of political uncertainty in Iraq following the March 7th parliamentary elections. Joost Hilterman of the International Crisis Group said the perpetrators of the violence are trying to take advantage of the political situation. Hilterman said, quote, "They want to exploit the current security vacuum and trigger violence between political parties. That will be a prescription for civil war," he said. We'll have more on Iraq later in the broadcast. In Afghanistan, U.S.-led forces have admitted to killing 2 pregnant Afghan women and a teenage girl during a nighttime raid February 12th. Afghan investigators told the Times of London U.S. Special Forces soldiers tried to cover up the killings. U.S. forces reportedly dug bullets out of their victims' bodies, then washed the wounds with alcohol before lying to their superiors about what happened. One of the women killed was a pregnant mother of 10, another a pregnant mother of 6. Initially, NATO military officials suggested the women were stabbed to death or had died by some other means hours before the raid. In other news from Afghanistan, German troops accidentally killed 6 Afghan soldiers Saturday. The killings occur as tensions mount between Afghan President Hamid Karzai and Western leaders. Last week, Karzai issued a harsh rebuke of Western and United Nations involvement in Afghanistan, criticizing what he called massive interference from foreigners. On Saturday, he reportedly told a group of Afghan lawmakers, quote, "If you and the international community pressure me more, I swear I'm going to join the Taliban." Beginning today, more than 200,000 unemployed workers won't receive their unemployment insurance benefits because Congress failed to agree on extending the emergency unemployment insurance measure. Also affected are COBRA health insurance subsidies for the unemployed. The bill was held up. A single lawmaker, Republican Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. The Hill newspaper reports those who will miss unemployment checks may see them in the future. That's because Senate Democrats want to pass an extension of the program that can be applied retroactively once Congress is back in session next week. In other economic news, the Labor Department has announced 162,000 jobs were created in March, the largest job gain in 3 years. But the nation's official unemployment rate remains at 9.7%. President Obama said the new jobs figures are encouraging.
And I've often had to report bad news during the course of this year, as the recession wreaked havoc on people's lives. But today is an encouraging day. We learned that the economy actually produced a substantial number of jobs instead of losing a substantial number of jobs. We are beginning to turn the corner.
Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens says he will decide soon whether to retire after 35 years on the court. The 89-year-old liberal justice told the Washington Post he plans to leave either this year or next. He said, quote, "I'll surely do it while he's still president," referring to Democratic President Barack Obama. His retirement would allow Obama to make a second appointment to the court in a year. A new federal report has criticized the Immigration and Customs Enforcement's 287G program, which gives state and local law enforcement agencies authority to enforce immigration laws. The Department of Homeland Security Office of Inspector General found the program does not have adequate safeguards against racial profiling and other civil rights abuses. In addition, the report said local police officers have misused the program by targeting undocumented immigrants who have been arrested for minor offenses. The report states, quote, "ICE can cannot be assured that the 287G program is meeting its intended purpose or that resources are being appropriately targeted toward aliens who pose the greatest risk to public safety and the community. Critics of the program say many immigrants will no longer call the local police help out of fear they could be arrested and deported. Laura Murphy of the American Civil Liberties Union said, quote, the 287G program, as this latest report confirms, all but abandons the constitutional guarantees of fair treatment and due process and encourages racial and ethnic profiling. South African President Jacob Zuma is calling for calm following the murder of a white supremacist leader named Eugene Ter Blanche. Ter Blanche was a longtime supporter of the apartheid government and an advocate for the creation of an all-white republican within South Africa. The killing comes 10 weeks before South Africa hosts the World Cup. Police say the killing was carried out by two farm workers over a wage dispute, but supporters of Ter Blanche claim it was racially motivated. Jackson Mthembu of the African National Congress called on the country to act with maturity.
Through our speculations, we might even create and fuel polarization of the various nationalities that we find in our country. We are therefore saying this time, these trying times in our country, needs all of us to act with maturity. And we as ANC will play our part. We expect other parties will do the same. Our condolences goes to the family of Ter Blanche, his organization, and all those who are close to him.
Egyptian authorities arrested the publisher of a new book praising former UN nuclear watchdog Mohammed al-Baradei. Egyptian security officials detained Ahmed Mahana on Saturday and seized his computer, manuscripts, and copies of the book Al-Baradei and the Dream of a Green Revolution. Mahana was released on Sunday. Mohammed al-Baradei has emerged as Egypt's highest-profile dissident since he retired as head of the International Atomic Energy Agency. He's considering running for president and challenging Hosni Mubarak, who's ruled Egypt since 1981. Here in New York, opponents of the Indian Point nuclear power plant have won a major victory. The State Department of Environmental Conservation has refused to grant the plant a critical water quality certification needed for the plant's two reactors to stay open. The state said the power plant's water intake system kills nearly 1 billion aquatic organisms a year, and that radioactive material had polluted the Hudson River after leaking into the groundwater. Opponents of the plant said they hope this ruling could lead to the plant's closing. State Assemblyman Richard Brodsky of Westchester said, quote, this is the beginning of the end of this massive destruction of the river. Environmentalists are criticizing the Obama administration for supporting a Bush-era policy that allows private mining companies to dump toxic waste on federal land without compensating the government for any environmental damage. Democratic Congressman Raul Grijalva of Arizona criticized the administration's decision. Grijalva said, quote, the rule makes no sense from a taxpayer standpoint, an economic standpoint, or an ecological standpoint. The only people to benefit are the country's largest mining companies. Anti-whaling activists from Greenpeace chained themselves to the mooring ropes of a cargo ship in the Netherlands in an effort to prevent a ship from leaving to Japan. Greenpeace claimed the ship was illegally transporting 7 containers storing meat from 10 endangered fin whales. Trade in these and other whale species is banned under the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species. This treaty was signed by 175 countries with the exception of Japan and Iceland, which refused to comply with its legislation and continued to trade in whale meat. In June, nations gathering at the International Whaling Committee will decide on the future of whales and whaling. Analysts say the committee may overturn its moratorium on commercial whaling. Security has been beefed up in state capitals across the country after at least 30 state governors received threatening letters last week from a leader of a right-wing group called Guardians of the Free Republics. The group called on the governors to step down within 3 days or be removed. Investigators said they fear the broad call for removing top state officials could inspire individuals to act out violently. The Guardians of the Free Republics has been associated with the sovereign citizen movement. And in China, 115 miners have been rescued after being trapped in a flooded coal pit for more than a week. Rescuers are still working on reaching the 38 still trapped miners. In 2009, over 2,600 workers died in mining accidents in China. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We begin